God.
Let me tell you about a murder that should never have happened. 23-year-old Kada Scott was shot in the head and buried in a shallow grave by a man who should have already been in prison. 21-year-old Keon King had been arrested twice before for domestic violence. In January 2025, he broke into a woman's home, returned armed with a gun, grabbed her, pulled her into his vehicle with his 2-year-old daughter in the back seat, and threatened to kill a witness. There was video evidence. He had an active warrant for kidnapping. He even appeared in court twice while that warrant was outstanding, and nobody arrested him. The district attorney requested $1 million bail. The commissioner set it at $200,000. Keon paid it immediately, $20,000 cash, and he walked free. The victim was too scared to show up to court because she knew he'd walk out the same door she would. The case was dismissed. 3 months later, Kada Scott went missing. 2 weeks after that, her body was found. Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner admitted, "The buck stops here. There are people who made bad decisions, but Kada Scott is dead. She had her whole life ahead of her. Penn State graduate, pageant queen, business owner, and she's gone because the system let a dangerous man walk free." But there's more to this story. Surveillance footage shows Keon didn't act alone. At least 2 other people helped dispose of Kada's body. 2 women who lived with him gave contradictory statements and were released. And someone out there knew exactly where to find her body, calling police and saying, "Go back, you missed her." Was Keon King hired to kill Kada Scott? And if so, why? Kada Scott was 23 years old. She graduated from Penn State University. She was a pageant winner who competed for Miss USA over the summer. She owned her own facial business that she started from her basement. She worked out, did yoga, and was what her friends described as someone who was big on energy. If you were down, Kada would cheer you up. She was glowing. She was ambitious. She had her whole life ahead of her. 1 a.m. on October 4th, her friend noticed something was wrong. Kada said something was weird, but neither of them knew that just 21 hours later, Kada would be dead. On October 4th, 2025, Kada went to work her overnight shift at the Terrace at Chestnut Hill, a senior living facility in Northeast Philadelphia. Her shift was supposed to run from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. She never made it through that shift. Around 10 p.m., a coworker saw Kada outside the building on her phone. She appeared upset. The coworker overheard her say, "I can't believe you're calling me about this." Then Kada walked toward a dark-colored car parked in the lot and got in. The car left immediately. Her own vehicle was left behind in the parking lot, along with her keys. At 10:24 p.m., Kada's phone went dark. No more calls, no more texts, no more activity. 4 minutes later, at 10:28 p.m., surveillance cameras at the Aubrey Recreation Center, just a few miles away, captured a black Hyundai Accent pulling into the parking lot. The car backed into a spot near the playground, right across from an abandoned middle school called Ada Lewis Middle School. That car stayed in that spot for 2.5 days. Investigators later determined that Kada Scott was already dead by the time that car parked. She was killed within 20 minutes of getting into that vehicle, shot in the head, and her body was left in that stolen Hyundai for more than 36 hours while the man who killed her figured out what to do next. The next day, October 5th, Kada's mother reported her missing. Police began investigating. They found her car at the nursing home. They found her phone case, her EBT card, and her glasses near Ada Lewis Middle School, but they didn't find Kada. Meanwhile, Keon King was moving. His cell phone data shows he traveled back and forth between that parking lot and a home on the 5500 block of Belmar Terrace in southwest Philadelphia. Multiple trips, over and over. Investigators would later search that home and find contractor bags, a hammer, latex gloves, and 9mm ammunition. 2 women lived at that address. Both were detained and questioned, and this is where the story gets messy. The first woman, 26 years old, initially asked for a lawyer when detectives read her Miranda rights. But when detectives left the room, she yelled out, that she didn't need a lawyer and wanted to talk. So they came back, reread her rights, and she started talking. She told detectives she didn't know Kada Scott. She'd never been to the area where Kada's body was found. She'd never been to Kada's workplace, but she did admit that she owned and operated a Text Now account. For those who don't know, Text Now is a phone service that allows people to text and call through an app without using their real number. She confirmed the email address tied to that Text Now account, and she said that before Kada's disappearance, no one else had access to that account, just her. Here's why that matters. That Text Now number had been in contact with Kada Scott since September 28th. 12 calls were made from that number to Kada's phone on October 4th alone, between 9:25 p.m. and 10:12 p.m. The last call lasted 43 seconds and ended at 10:12 p.m. while Kada was still at work. But here's the twist. On October 2nd, that Text Now account sent Kada a message that said, "Yo Kada, this my new number." Kada replied, "Who this?" And the user identified himself as Kel. That's Keon King's nickname. So if this woman owned the Text Now account and no one else had access to it before Kada disappeared, how was Keon messaging Kada from that number? The woman told detectives that after Kada's family called her on October 6th, asking if she knew where Kada was, she gave her Android device, the one with the Text Now account, to the second woman. But when detectives questioned the second woman, 29 years old, she denied it. She said she never had that phone. She denied any knowledge of owning or possessing the phone in question. The second woman told detectives she had been staying with the first woman for several days. She also said they had previously been in an intimate relationship. She was present when Kada's family called the first woman asking about Kada's whereabouts. And she said that after that phone call, the first woman became nervous. Both women were eventually released. No charges. Despite the contradictions, despite the evidence tying that Text Now number to Keon, despite the cell phone data showing Keon's phone traveling back and forth between their home and the location where Kada's body would later be found. But let's go back to October 5th, because this is when things get even darker. At 11:39 p.m. on October 5th, more than 24 hours after Kada was killed, surveillance footage shows a gold Toyota Camry pulling into the parking lot at the Aubrey Recreation Center. The Camry was registered to Keon King. 2 people got out of the car. A third person, the driver, drove away and left them there. Those 2 people waited for 4 hours, just standing in that parking lot in the middle of the night. Then, at 3:56 a.m. on October 6th, they made their move. The surveillance footage shows those 2 individuals approaching the black Hyundai Accent, the one that had been sitting there for over a day and a half. They opened the car and they lifted out a heavy object consistent with what would be a human body. They carried that object toward the playground, through a wooded area and behind the abandoned Ada Lewis Middle School. They buried Kada Scott in a shallow grave. About half an hour later, at 4:25 a.m., the footage shows those same 2 individuals returning to the Hyundai, getting inside for a short time, then exiting and walking back toward the wooded area before leaving the scene. The car with the third person, the driver, turned its headlights on and drove off. 2 days later, on October 7th, that black Hyundai Accent was found burned, set on fire in an attempt to destroy any forensic evidence. The vehicle was already towed to a junkyard and compacted before investigators even had a chance to fully process it as a crime scene. Gone, just like that. But the Philadelphia Police Department didn't give up. Homicide detectives and the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force worked around the clock. They tracked Keon King's cell phone. They pulled surveillance footage. They interviewed witnesses. And on October 14th, they made their first arrest. Keon King turned himself in, but he didn't do it alone. His lawyer arranged the surrender. His parents hired an attorney before King was even officially charged. And that attorney, a well-known Philadelphia defense lawyer named Shaka Johnson, called the district attorney's office and said, "My client is willing to turn himself in. Do you want me to bring him in, or are you going to come looking for him?" King was initially charged with kidnapping, stalking, and false imprisonment in connection with Kada's disappearance. At that point, Kada's body had not been found yet. She was still missing, but investigators had enough evidence to charge him. They had the cell phone data placing him with Kada the night she disappeared. They had the text now messages. They had the surveillance footage. They had witnesses who saw Kada get into a dark-colored car. And they had Keon King's history, because this wasn't Keon King's first time being accused of kidnapping a woman. Let's talk about January 13th, 2025. 9 months before Kada Scott was killed, Keon King was involved with a woman. They had a child together, a 2-year-old daughter. And according to court documents, their relationship was violent. On January 13th, King showed up at the woman's home at 9 a.m. and tried to break in. He couldn't get in, so he left. But he came back at 3:30 p.m. This time, he was armed. Video footage shows him walking up to the home with what appeared to be a gun. When the woman walked outside, King grabbed her and pulled her into his vehicle. His 2-year-old daughter was in the back seat. He threatened to kill a witness who saw what was happening. Then he drove off with the woman against her will. He was charged with kidnapping, assault, strangulation, and terroristic threats. The district attorney's office requested $1 million bail. They wanted King held without bail because of the severity of the charges and because he was a danger to the community. But the bail commissioner didn't agree. Bail was set at $200,000. Keon King paid $20,000, 10% of the bail amount, and he walked out immediately. Where did that money come from? King was 21 years old. He didn't have a legitimate job, but people in the neighborhood knew him as the pharmacist. That's street slang for a drug dealer. And apparently he had access to money, so he posted bail and went home. The victim was terrified. She knew he was out. She knew he could come back. And when her court date came, she didn't show up. The case was dismissed. But here's the problem. While King was out on bail for that case, there was another case. About a month before the kidnapping, King was accused of breaking into that same woman's home and attempting to strangle her. That case was also pending. And even worse, police issued a warrant for King's arrest in connection with the kidnapping charge. The victim may not have shown up to court, but there was still probable cause. There was video evidence. There were witnesses. Police had enough to arrest him, but they didn't. King appeared in court twice for the strangulation case while that kidnapping warrant was active. Twice. He walked into a courthouse, sat in front of a judge, and walked back out. And nobody arrested him. Why? Because the system is broken. Because prosecutors and police didn't communicate. Because the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. Because Keon King fell through the cracks. And 3 months later, Kada Scott paid for that failure with her life. Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner held a press conference after Kada's body was found. And to his credit, he didn't make excuses. He owned it. But here's the thing. Krasner can talk about systemic change all he wants. Kada Scott is dead, and she's not the only one. 70% of domestic violence victims in Philadelphia don't show up to court. 70%. That's not a coincidence. That's fear. Victims know that their abusers will be back on the street, and they're too scared to testify. And the system allows it to happen. But Krasner wasn't the only one who failed. The courts failed. The bail commissioner failed. The police failed. Everyone failed Kada Scott. And there's one more layer to this story that makes it even more disturbing. Keon King's father was also charged with killing his wife years ago. Violence runs in this family. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Now let's talk about the search. Because the way Kada Scott's body was found raises even more questions about who was involved in her murder. On October 5th, the day after Kada disappeared, her mother reported her missing. Police immediately began searching. They knew something was wrong. Kada's car was still in the parking lot at her workplace. Her keys were missing. Her phone was off. And witnesses said she'd gotten into a dark-colored car and left. For the next 13 days, the city of Philadelphia searched for Kada Scott. Her family held vigils. They posted flyers. They organized community searches. Volunteers combed through wooded areas, vacant lots, and abandoned buildings. The reward for information grew to $12,000. Kada's father spoke to CBS News Philadelphia 2 weeks into the search. He was still hopeful, still believing his daughter would come home alive. But behind the scenes, investigators already knew the truth was much darker. On October 7th, police got a tip about a burned vehicle. That black Hyundai Accent, the stolen car that Keon King had used, was found torched. But by the time investigators arrived to examine it, the car had already been towed to a junkyard and compacted. The crime scene was destroyed, gone, just like that. On October 9th, police executed a search warrant at the home on Belmar Terrace, where those 2 women lived with Keon King. They recovered contractor bags, latex gloves, a hammer, and ammunition. The 2 women were detained and questioned, but as we already discussed, they were released. On October 10th, police began searching the Aubrey Arboretum, a 50-acre botanical garden about 3 miles from where Kada worked. They used drones, K-9 units, and CSI teams. They searched for hours, but they found nothing. On October 15th, 5 days later, police asked the public to help locate Keon King's gold Toyota Camry. That same day, the car was spotted in a parking lot at the Gypsy Lane condos. That's where Keon's mother lived. Surveillance footage showed the vehicle arriving at 3 p.m. on October 10th. A lone male matching King's description was seen repeatedly accessing the trunk and then leaving the car. What was in that trunk? We don't know, but investigators seized the vehicle. That same day, October 15th, police returned to the Aubrey Arboretum. But this time, they also searched the abandoned Ada Lewis Middle School next door. And that's when they found evidence. Kada's EBT card, her phone case, physical items that belonged to her. But they still didn't find Kada. Then, on October 18th, 2 weeks after Kada disappeared, police received an anonymous tip. Someone called 911 and told them to go back to Ada Lewis Middle School to search the wooded area behind the school. To look more carefully, police went back. They searched, and they found nothing. But then a second anonymous tip came in. This time it wasn't a phone call. It was an email sent to the Philadelphia police tip line, and this email was specific. It said, "Go back. She's there. You missed her. Look again." And the tipster gave them an exact location in the woods. Police went back on October 18th, and this time an officer stepped on newly disturbed dirt. They started digging, and in a shallow grave in the woods behind that abandoned school, they found Kada Scott's body. DNA testing confirmed it was her, a 99.9% match to DNA collected from her parents. Here's the question that nobody can answer. Who was that tipster? How did they know exactly where Kada's body was buried? Down to the specific spot in the woods? The only people who would know that information are the people who put her there. Was it one of the accomplices who had a guilty conscience? Was it someone who witnessed the burial and stayed silent for 2 weeks before finally speaking up? Or was it someone closer to Keon King who knew what he'd done and decided to turn on him? Police are still investigating the identity of that tipster. They want to know if that person was involved or if they simply had information. But whoever it was, they saved this case. Without that second tip, Kada Scott might still be in that shallow grave, undiscovered. On October 19th, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office completed their examination of Kada's remains. The cause of death was ruled a gunshot wound to the head. The manner of death was homicide. And that same day, the district attorney's office approved additional charges against Keon King: murder, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, firearms violations, robbery, conspiracy. Keon King appeared for his arraignment via video conference. He was polite, answering "yes, ma'am" when the judge asked him questions. The judge ordered him held without bail. He's been behind bars ever since. But here's what's still bothering people. Keon King didn't do this alone. The surveillance footage proves it. At least 2 other people helped move and bury Kada's body. A third person drove them to the scene and left them there. 2 women lived with Keon and gave contradictory statements about the Text Now phone. And someone out there knew exactly where Kada was buried. So why hasn't anyone else been charged? Police say the investigation is ongoing. They're looking for accomplices. They're analyzing evidence. They're building their case. But it's been weeks, and no one else has been arrested. And that brings us to one of the most controversial figures in this case, a woman named Gabby. Now, Gabby's name doesn't appear anywhere in the official court documents. Police haven't publicly named her as a suspect or even a person of interest. But online, people are convinced she knows something. And the reason for that is because she posted a video on TikTok explaining her connection to the case. According to Gabby, she grew up with Kada's younger sister. They were childhood friends, but they grew apart when Gabby was around 11 or 12 years old. She says she and Kada had probably exchanged no more than 6 words throughout their entire lives. They were simply neighbors, not friends. Gabby also says she and Keon King were friends. She describes him as someone who would call her just to check in and talk. And according to Gabby, before Kada went missing, Keon called her and asked if she knew Kada because he'd noticed that Kada lived close to Gabby's neighborhood. Gabby told him she knew who Kada was, but not personally. And according to Gabby, the call lasted only 29 seconds. She didn't think anything of it because Keon often called her to talk about girls. Just casual conversation. But here's where Gabby's story starts falling apart. After Kada went missing and Keon was arrested, Gabby's best friend told her she needed to go to the police with this information. But Gabby refused. She says it's because Keon had already turned himself in, so there was nothing to report. She also says she's not a cop caller, and that's just the way she was raised. But people online started asking questions, and Gabby's best friend went live on social media and told her side of the story, saying Gabby was acting weird about the whole situation and refusing to cooperate with police. So Gabby made her own TikTok video to defend herself, but that video only made things worse. First, Gabby posted a screenshot of the call log showing her conversation with Keon, but eagle-eyed viewers noticed something. The call log said, outgoing, not incoming. That means Gabby called Keon, not the other way around. So why did she say in her video that Keon called her? Second, people started digging into Gabby's background, and they found out that in March 2025, just 7 months before Kada was killed, Gabby was arrested. The charges? Possession of a weapon, terroristic threats, conspiracy assault, aggravated assault, and endangering another person. She's currently out on bond with a pending case in court. So this woman has a history of violence and weapons charges. She's friends with Keon King. She called him around the time Kada went missing, and she refused to go to the police with information. And people are supposed to believe she had nothing to do with this. After people started questioning her involvement, Gabby deleted her TikTok video. Then she deleted her entire TikTok account. She disappeared from social media completely. Now, to be clear, Gabby has not been charged with anything related to Kada's murder. Police have not named her as a suspect. But the fact that she's out there with a criminal record, with a connection to Keon King, and with knowledge about his interest in Kada before she died, it raises serious questions. Was Gabby one of the people who helped Keon? Did she give him information about Kada? Did she help set Kada up? We don't know, but people are watching. And if Gabby was involved, eventually the truth will come out. Because here's the thing, Keon King is facing life in prison. He's looking at murder charges, kidnapping charges, conspiracy charges, and when people are facing that kind of time, they start talking. They start making deals. They start giving up names. And if Keon decides to cooperate with prosecutors, if he decides to tell them who else was involved, then everyone who helped him is going down. Now let's talk about the text messages. Because the messages between Kada and Keon in the days leading up to her death are some of the most confusing pieces of evidence in this case. Remember that Text Now account started communicating with Kada on September 28th, but the person behind that account didn't identify themselves until October 2nd. That's 4 days of messages where Kada didn't even know who she was talking to. Then on October 2nd, the account sent her a message that said, "Yo Kada, this my new number." Kada replied, "Who this?" And the user said, Kel. That's Keon King's street name. But here's the problem. That Text Now account was registered to the 26-year-old woman's Gmail account, the woman who lived at the Belmar Terrace house. And she told police that before Kada's disappearance, no one else had access to that account. So if no one else had access, how was Keon messaging Kada from September 28th through October 2nd? Was the woman lying? Was she helping Keon set Kada up from the very beginning? Or did Keon somehow get access to her phone without her knowledge? And what about those 4 days of messages before Keon identified himself? What was being said? Who was Kada thinking she was talking to? Police haven't released those messages. Maybe they're not relevant, or maybe they reveal something critical about how Kada was lured into this trap. Then we get to October 4th, the day Kada died, and this is where the text messages get really strange. At 10:07 a.m. on October 4th, Kada sent a message to that Text Now number. The message said, "Kidnap me again. Kidnap me again." Now, when people first heard about this message, there was a lot of confusion. Was Kada joking? Was this some kind of code? Was she asking Keon to come pick her up? And here's where understanding Philadelphia street slang becomes important. Multiple people from Philly have come forward online to explain that "come kidnap me" or "kidnap me" is a common phrase used in that city. It means "come get me" or "come pick me up." It's not literal. It's just slang for asking someone to scoop you up and hang out. So when Kada texted "kidnap me again," she was likely just asking Keon to come pick her up. Maybe they'd hung out before. Maybe he'd given her a ride somewhere. We don't know. But the phrase itself probably wasn't meant to be taken literally. Keon responded, "Better be up to." And then they made plans to meet that night. At 10:09 p.m., just after Kada arrived at work, she sent her final text message. "CM when you hear." CM stands for call me. 6 minutes later at 10:15 p.m., cell phone data shows Kada's phone and Keon's phone were together near her workplace. 9 minutes after that, at 10:24 p.m., Kada's phone went dark. She was dead, shot in the head within 20 minutes of getting into that car. But here's what people are questioning. Did Kada actually send that "kidnap me again" message? Or did someone else send it from her phone to make it look like she was willingly meeting up with Keon? Remember, Kada's friend said she was with Kada at 1 a.m. on October 4th, just hours before that text was sent. And Kada told her friend that something was weird. Something was bothering her. Kada's parents also said that in the days leading up to her disappearance, she told them someone was harassing her via phone. So if someone was harassing Kada, if something felt weird to her, why would she willingly agree to meet up with that person later that night? Unless she didn't. Some people believe Keon sent that "kidnap me again" message from Kada's phone to make it look like she was meeting him voluntarily, to create a false narrative that they were romantically involved or hanging out regularly. Because if it looks like Kada wanted to be with him, then it's harder to prove kidnapping. But no, there's a problem with that theory. The messages were sent at 10:07 a.m. Kada was at home at that time. She didn't go to work until 10 p.m. So if Keon sent the message from her phone, that means he had access to her phone 12 hours before she disappeared, which means he was either with her that morning or he'd stolen her phone earlier and was using it to set up the meeting. We don't know. Police haven't clarified, but it's one of the biggest unanswered questions in this case. What we do know is that Keon called Kada 12 times between 9:25 p.m. and 10:12 p.m. on October 4th. 12 calls in less than an hour. That's not normal. That's not casual. That's persistent. That's someone who's trying to get a hold of somebody right now. And we know that Kada's co-worker saw her outside on the phone looking upset and heard her say, "I can't believe you're calling me about this." So Kada was frustrated. She was annoyed. Whatever Keon was calling her about, she didn't want to deal with it, but she still got in that car. Why? Did she think she could handle it? Did she think she was just going to have a quick conversation and come back to work? Did she trust Keon enough to believe he wouldn't hurt her? Or was she forced into that car? We may never know the full truth, but what we do know is that within 20 minutes, Kada Scott was dead. And now her family is left with nothing but questions and grief. On November 2nd, the community held a vigil for Kada Scott. Hundreds of people showed up. Balloons were released, prayers were said, and Kada's aunt, representing the family, spoke to the crowd. The family got their baby back, but not the way they wanted. Not alive, not safe, not whole. And the question still remains. Why did this happen? What was the motive? So let's talk about motive, because that's the question everyone keeps asking. Why did Keon King kill Kada Scott? What was the reason? And the truth is, we don't have a clear answer. Police haven't publicly stated a motive. Keon King hasn't given a statement. And the people who might know, the accomplices who helped him, haven't been charged or cooperated with authorities. But there are theories, and some of them are darker than others. Theory number 1, jealousy. Multiple people who knew Kada have said the same thing. She was too ambitious for the environment she was in. She was a Penn State graduate in a neighborhood where most people didn't go to college. She was a pageant queen in a community where that kind of success breeds envy. She owned her own business. She was glowing. She was making moves, and some people couldn't stand it. There's a comment online that sums it up perfectly. Someone wrote, "La Kada was so ambitious, she became engulfed by jealous hood folks." And that's a real thing. When you're surrounded by people who aren't on your level, who aren't striving for the same things you are, who don't have the same vision for their lives, your success can make them feel small. And instead of being inspired by you, they become resentful. They want to tear you down. They want to see you fail. So was Kada killed because someone was jealous of her? Did someone see her success and decide they wanted to take it away from her? It's possible. But if that's the case, W. Ho was jealous. Was it one of those two women who lived with Keon? Was it someone else in the neighborhood? And if jealousy was the motive, why would Keon be the one to pull the trigger? What did he have to gain, unless he was paid to do it? Which brings us to theory number 2. This was a hired hit. And this theory is gaining a lot of traction online, because when you look at the evidence, it does seem premeditated. Keon stole that car the day before he killed Kada. He got a new text now number and started messaging her a week before her death. He called her 12 times in less than an hour on the night she died. And when he picked her up, he killed her within 20 minutes. No argument, no fight, no time wasted. Just boom, gunshot to the head, done. That's not a crime of passion. That's not someone who snapped in the heat of the moment. That's someone who had a job to do and did it. And then there's the method. Keon King's prior crimes involved strangulation. He grabbed women, he choked them, he used his hands. That's personal, that's intimate, that's someone who wants to feel the life leaving someone's body. But with Kada, he shot her in the head, from a distance, quick, efficient, detached. That's not Keon's style. So why did he do it that way? Was he told to? Was he following orders? And then there's the money. Remember, Keon posted a $20,000 bail in January for his kidnapping case. That's a lot of cash for a 21-year-old with no legitimate job. People say he was the neighborhood pharmacist, meaning he sold drugs. But even for a small-time dealer, $20,000 cash is significant. So if Keon had access to that kind of money in January, what did his finances look like in October? Did he suddenly have more money after Kada died? Did someone pay him to kill her? And if so, who? One of the women who lived with him gave him a check after he came back from disposing of Kada's body. A check. That detail is in the police reports. Why would she give him a check after Kada was killed? Unless it was payment for something? But here's the problem with the hired hit theory. What would be the reason? Who would want Kada dead? She was a 23-year-old woman working at a nursing home, running a small facial business, competing in pageants. She wasn't involved in anything illegal. She wasn't a threat to anyone. She wasn't a snitch. She wasn't a witness to a crime. So why would someone pay to have her killed? Unless there's something we don't know, some connection, some relationship, some secret that hasn't come out yet. And that brings us to the biggest mystery in this case. What was Kada's relationship with Keon King? Because here's what we know. They were in contact. They were texting. They made plans to meet. Kada willingly got into his car. She knew him. But how did she know him? And why was she in contact with him? Kada's family and friends have said she had no business being around people like Keon. She wasn't involved in street life. She wasn't dating guys like that. She was focused. She had goals. So how did a Penn State graduate pageant queen end up in the orbit of a violent drug dealer with a kidnapping record? Some people think Keon was stalking her. Remember, Kada told her family and friends that someone was harassing her via phone in the days leading up to her disappearance. Was that Keon? Was he obsessed with her? Did he see her around the neighborhood, become infatuated and start pursuing her, even though she wasn't interested? That would explain why Keon called his friend Gabby and asked about Kada. He wanted to know where she lived. He wanted to know if she was a cool person. He was gathering information, like a predator studying his prey. But if Keon was stalking Kada, why would she agree to meet him? Why would she get in his car? Unless she didn't know it was him. Remember, that text now number started messaging her on September 28th, but the person didn't identify themselves as Kel until October 2nd. So for 4 days, Kada was talking to someone and she didn't know who it was. Maybe she thought she was talking to someone else. Maybe someone was catfishing her, pretending to be someone she trusted, and then Keon showed up to meet her instead. Or maybe Kada did know Keon, but she didn't know how dangerous he was. Maybe they'd hung out before. Maybe he'd given her a ride somewhere. Maybe she thought they were cool, and she had no idea that he'd kidnapped another woman just 9 months earlier. She had no idea that he was capable of violence. She had no idea that getting into that car would be the last decision she'd ever make. We don't know, and until Keon talks, or until one of his accomplices talks, we may never know the full truth about their relationship. But here's what we do know. Kada Scott is dead, and Keon King is responsible. Now let's talk about Keon King's defense attorney, Shaka Johnson, because his involvement in this case has sparked a lot of controversy. Shaka Johnson is a well-known criminal defense attorney in Philadelphia. He's represented high-profile clients. He's been on TV, he's got a reputation, and when Keon King's family hired him, a lot of people in the community were angry. How could a black attorney defend a black man accused of killing a black woman? How could Shaka Johnson take this case, knowing what Keon is accused of? How could he stand up in court and fight for someone who took the life of a young, ambitious, beautiful sister? People started a petition to get Shaka Johnson removed from the case. They accused him of being a sellout. They said he was putting money over morals. They said he should refuse to represent Keon King. But Shaka Johnson didn't back down. He gave an interview explaining his position, and whether you agree with him or not, he made some valid points. Shaka Johnson makes a fair point. Every criminal defendant has a right to an attorney. That's the Constitution. That's the foundation of our justice system. If we start saying that certain defendants don't deserve representation, or that certain attorneys shouldn't take certain cases, then we're breaking down the very system that's supposed to protect us all. And Shaka's right. In Philadelphia, most violent crime is black on black. So if black attorneys refuse to defend black defendants accused of harming other black people, then who would represent them? Would we just let the system railroad them without a defense? Would we just throw them in prison without a fair trial? No. Everyone deserves their day in court. Everyone deserves someone to fight for them, even Keon King. But here's where it gets complicated. Shaka Johnson said he met Keon's family before he knew what the charges were. He said Keon's parents are salt of the earth people. He said he engaged with them, got to know them, and then found out about the kidnapping and murder charges. But once he found out, he stayed. He didn't walk away. He didn't say, "This is too much." He committed to defending Keon King, and that's his right. But it's also the family's right to be angry. It's the community's right to be angry, because at the end of the day, Shaka Johnson is going to do everything in his power to get Keon King the best possible outcome. And that means trying to poke holes in the prosecution's case. That means questioning witnesses. That means challenging evidence. That means potentially attacking Kada's character to create reasonable doubt. And that's what people are upset about. Not that Keon has an attorney, but that his attorney might try to make it seem like Kada was somehow responsible for what happened to her, that she was involved in something shady, that she chose to be around Keon King, that her death was somehow her own fault. And if that happens, if Shaka Johnson goes down that road, then yes, people have every right to be furious. But so far, Shaka hasn't done that. He's been professional, he's been respectful, he arranged Keon's surrender, he's following the law, and whether we like it or not, that's his job. Now let's talk about what happens next, because this case is far from over. Keon King is being held without bail. He's facing multiple charges: murder, kidnapping, conspiracy, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, firearms violations, robbery, arson, and more. If convicted on all counts, he's looking at life in prison. No parole, no second chances. Life. But Keon's not the only one who should be worried. Remember, surveillance footage shows at least 2 other people helped move and bury Kada's body. A third person drove them to the scene. 2 women lived with Keon and gave contradictory statements. And someone out there sent that anonymous tip telling police exactly where to find Kada's body. So where are those charges? Why hasn't anyone else been arrested? The answer is simple. Prosecutors are building their case. They want to make sure they have solid evidence before they bring charges. They don't want to arrest someone and then have the case fall apart in court. They want to get it right. And there's another possibility. Prosecutors might be waiting to see if Keon cooperates, if he gives up names, if he tells them who helped him and why Kada was killed. Because if Keon talks, he might be able to get a deal, a plea bargain. life in prison instead of the death penalty, or maybe even less time if he provides substantial assistance. And if Keon does talk, then everyone who helped him is going down. Accomplices will be charged, co-conspirators will be arrested, and the full truth of what happened to Kada Scott will finally come out. But here's the thing, even if everyone involved is arrested, even if they're all convicted, even if they all spend the rest of their lives in prison, it won't bring Kada back. It won't undo the pain her family is feeling. It won't give her mother another chance to hug her daughter. It won't give her father another chance to see her smile. Kada Scott is gone, and no amount of justice will change that. But what can change is the system that failed her. Because make no mistake, the system did fail Kada Scott. Keon King should have been in jail when Kada disappeared. He should have been locked up for kidnapping that woman in January. He should have been held without bail because of the severity of his crimes and his danger to the community. But instead, he posted bail and walked free, and the system allowed it. The victim in that case should have been protected. She should have been given resources, support, and security so she felt safe enough to testify. But instead, she was terrified. She knew Keon was out there. She knew he could come back, and she made the decision that her life was more important than getting justice. And the system allowed that, too. Keon King appeared in court twice, while he had an active warrant for kidnapping. Twice. And nobody arrested him. Not the court officers, not the sheriffs, not the prosecutors, nobody. How does that happen? How does a man with a violent felony warrant walk in and out of a courthouse without being taken into custody? Because the system is broken, because there's no communication between agencies, because nobody is accountable. And now Kada Scott is dead because of it. Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner admitted there were failures. He said people made bad decisions. He said they're working on systemic changes. But how many more women have to die before those changes actually happen? According to statistics, 70% of domestic violence victims in Philadelphia don't show up to court. 70%. That's not a coincidence. That's fear. That's women knowing their abusers will be back on the street, and they're too terrified to face them. And the system does nothing to fix it. Prosecutors don't build cases without the victim's testimony. Police don't make arrests when there's an active warrant. Judges don't hold dangerous men without bail. And women keep dying. Kada Scott should be alive today. She should be running her business. She should be competing in pageants. She should be glowing, but she's not. She's in a grave because the system that was supposed to protect her failed her. And that's the real tragedy of this case. Now, I want to end by talking about Kada's legacy because despite everything that happened, despite the horror of her death, Kada Scott's life mattered. Her story matters, and the way the community came together for her matters. When Kada went missing, the city of Philadelphia mobilized. Volunteers searched day and night. Flyers were posted on every corner. Vigils were held. Prayers were said. Social media was flooded with her face and her story. People who didn't even know Kada showed up to help find her. And when her body was found, the community mourned. Hundreds of people attended her vigil. Blue balloons were released in her honor. Her name was chanted. Her life was celebrated. Kada Scott's name will not be forgotten. Her story will not be buried. And the people responsible for her death will not get away with it because the community is watching. The family is fighting, and justice will be served. But beyond the court case, beyond the convictions, beyond the prison sentences, there's a lesson here. And it's a lesson that every young woman needs to hear. Be careful who you trust. Be careful who you let into your life. Be careful who you give your time, your energy, and your attention to. Because not everyone who smiles in your face has good intentions. Not everyone who calls you wants what's best for you. Not everyone who says they're your friend is actually your friend. Kada Scott was glowing. She was on her way up. She had her whole life ahead of her. But somewhere along the way, she crossed paths with the wrong person, and it cost her everything. So if you're watching this and you're a young woman trying to make it, trying to build something, trying to succeed, please protect yourself, protect your energy, protect your space, protect your peace. Don't let jealous people drag you down. Don't let toxic people into your circle. And if something feels weird, if someone feels off, if your gut is telling you something is wrong, listen to it. Kada told her friend something was weird. She told her family someone was harassing her. She knew something wasn't right, but she still got in that car. Don't make that mistake. Trust your instincts. And if you feel like you're in danger, get help. Tell someone. Call the police. Remove yourself from the situation. Your life is too valuable to risk. Kada Scott's death is a tragedy, but it doesn't have to be in vain. If her story can save one life, if her story can make one woman think twice before trusting the wrong person, if her story can inspire one change in the system that failed her, then her legacy will live on. Rest in peace, Kada Scott. Your name will not be forgotten. Your light will not be dimmed. And your story will continue to inspire, to warn, and to protect the women who come after you. Justice for Kada Scott. Always. If you want to stay updated on this case as it develops, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications. Because when more charges are filed, when accomplices are arrested, when the trial begins, we'll be here to break it all down. Rest in power, Kada Scott. Your story matters. Your life mattered, and you will never be forgotten.